A very good evening to one and all. I can see many of the teenagers who have already joined the session. I request all of you to please switch on your camera so that we can make the session more interactive. I can still see Aisha because I can just see the video participants on the screen. So I can see Aisha, Arisha, Ellen, Arushi is there. Please switch on your camera, guys. So we have our esteemed guest with us. So I'll be starting in Cup. We'll just wait for 2 more minutes and we'll start off with the session. Till now, I can see 5 or 6 teens who have switched on their cameras. I request all of you to switch it on. So, ma'am, with your due permission, I'll just start off with the session.
Sure, Tejaswini.
Yeah. So, a very good evening to one and all. On behalf of the World Teen Parliament and Blub World, it's my privilege to welcome you all in this session. I am Tejaswini Thakur, and I extend my welcome and a warm welcome to our distinguished guest, Mrs. Preeti Binoy, Head of Corporate Communications and Government Affairs at Kimberly-Clark, India. Ma'am, thank you so much for giving your time. Thank you so much for giving all of the knowledge that you're going to give to the students in the session. And I hope the session will be very much interactive. So I encourage all of the teenagers to actively take part in this. We will be having direct conversations with the guest. And thank you so much once again to all of the teenagers. And thank you so much to ma'am for joining us. I'll hand over the mic to ma'am. She'll start off with her opening address and you'll be fortunate to listen to that. And then after that, we'll start off with the questions.
Thank you, Tejaswini. And good evening, good morning, good afternoon. I don't know. I know for a fact that young teenagers from all across the world have joined this call. So thank you so much to each one of you for making time. I think it's a precious weekend, which all of you love to have. And the fact that you guys are really encouraged to join this call means that you taking communication very seriously, want to effectively develop it as a skill set. And I think that's a great opportunity for all of us, right? Having said that, you can call me Preeti. That's my first name. You can address me as Preeti. Let's have a fun, engaging 60 minutes conversation. What I'm going to do is ideally, I'll just start off with playing a video and I'll possibly pop a question to all of y'all, whoever thinks that they're comfortable to answer it, just raise your hand or just put in a reaction. And I think Tejaswini and her team will help you unmute, or you can unmute and just ask a question or even answer, right, while we are talking. Do not hesitate. You can stop me in case you have a question pertaining to a certain section. But what I'm going to try and do is not overburden you with a lot of literature, but just give you some simple, very easy tips that you can use in your day-to-day life to communicate well. Then it could possibly be with your parents, your teachers, your peers, your friends, anybody that you've been engaging around with, right? And just small little quick tips and ideas that can possibly help you navigate this whole communication hurdle that you may be facing. So with that, if I can request Tejaswini to help me kickstart with a video where I just want to showcase to you guys on how important and effective communication is. And I'll ask you all questions pertaining to it.
Ma'am, I hope the screen is visible.
Yes, it is. I hope the audio is audible to everybody. In case it's not, just put in a chat response or just unmute and let Tejaswini know if you all can't hear the audio.
Yes, I have started off. I will just start off the video and I hope the teens can hear it too.
Shit, now I want to find out the fellow's name. As long as it's okay with the audience. Think about baseball. Will you stand still? Pick up your hat. Go pick up your hat. Okay. Now look. Then you'll go and penny your popcorn and don't interrupt the act anymore. Yes, sir. All right. But you know, strange may seem, they give ball players nowadays very peculiar names. Funny names? Nicknames, pet names. Not as funny as my name, Sebastian Dinwiddie. Oh, yes. Funnier than that? Oh, absolutely. Yes. Now, on the St. Louis team, we have who's on first, what's on second. I don't know who's on third. That's what I want to find out. I want you to tell me the names of the fellas on the St. Louis team. I'm telling you, who's on first, what's on second. I don't know who's on third. Do you know the fellas' names? Yes. Well, then who's playing first? Yes. I mean, the fellow's name on first base. Who? The fellow playing first base for St. Louis. Who? The guy on first base. Who is on first? Well, what are you asking me for? I'm not asking you. I'm telling you who is on first. I'm asking you who's on first. That's the man's name. That's whose name? Yes. Well, go ahead and tell me. Who? The guy on first. Who? The first base. Who is on first? Have you got a first baseman on first? Certainly. Then who's playing first? Absolutely. When you pay off the first baseman every month, who gets the money? Every dollar of it. Why not? The man's entitled to it. Who is? Yes. So who gets it? Why shouldn't he? Sometimes his wife comes down and collects it. Whose wife? Yes. After all, the man earns it. Who does? Absolutely. Well, all I'm trying to find out is what's the guy's name on first base? Oh, no. What is on second base? I'm not asking you who's on second. Who's on first? That's what I'm trying to find out. Well, don't change the players. I'm not changing nobody. Take it easy. What's the guy's name on first base? What's the guy's name on second base? I'm not asking you who's on second. Who's on first? I don't know. He's on third. We're not talking about.
All right, you all saw this interesting video, right? Just unmute whoever knows the answer. I want to know what were the two guys trying to say to each other. Those are two friends who are conversing about a hypothetical baseball match. What was the sender trying to tell the receiver? And what was the receiver understanding? So who wants to possibly go at this?
You people can raise your hand and then
just raise your hand or just unmute yourself. Okay, otherwise I'm going to just handpick whoever I can see on the screen. Is that all right?
Sure, ma'am, please do it. I can.
Did everybody get to hear the entire video? I hope so. Right? Okay, I can see Anusha raising her hand. Anusha, you want to just unmute yourself?
Hello.
Hi, Anusha.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hello.
Yes, Anusha, we can hear you.
Yeah, so basically the first person who is the sender is saying that the name of the person who is in the first position is who, while the receiver is understanding it or interpreting it as though who is that person, like in the way of the question. And the second thing was the person on the second place was named what, and that was the second conclusion in the conversation.
Fantastic, Anusha. Thank you so much. That's right. So the conversation that was going on with the two friends was about a hypothetical situation where the first, second, and third players' names were, number one was who, number two was what, and number three was I don't know. But unfortunately, while the sender was trying to communicate this, the receiver on the other end couldn't understand. This is a fine example to say and to kickstart the session to tell you all, communication is key. It's very important how we communicate. Then, for that matter, it could be our feelings. It could be what we want to articulate, a situation, anything for that matter. But if at all you're not able to communicate in the right fashion, the opposite person is not going to understand that, right? So like they say, honestly, communication is an absolutely important key. And the reason, it can totally change the game for you. Effective communication is that piece which can make or break situations. And it could be with anybody, like I just said, right? Whether it's chatting with friends, presenting in a class, hashing things out possibly with your folks. It's very important of how you communicate. And like I said sometime back, this can make or break your day or a situation. So why is it important to master the art of expression so crucial, right, for teens? Because many a times we say teens are misunderstood. Teens are misunderstood because you're not communicating right. You're not able to express to either your parent, your teacher, your colleague, or a sibling for that matter, right? And it's very simple. It's all about making sure you are heard, and the other person is hearing you. You are understood, and at the same time, you're also understanding others, right? While I'm explaining this to you, I'm kind of thinking in my mind also, looking at the reactions on the screen, right? That you guys must be thinking, but I communicate all the time. Why do I need someone to tell me about communication? Fair question. Absolutely fair. So what happens and why is it critical and important? So while we all talk, we text, we are doing stuff effectively every day, right? The only important and critical point is, are you able to get your point across very clearly? Are you able to send across the question you're asking very precisely to the opposite person? Is there finesse in what you're trying to say? That's the most important thing. You saw the example that we kickstarted with, right? Was the sender able to communicate what he was laying down as an example to the receiver? He wasn't. Was that effective communication? It wasn't. So what is effectively said is that when you're able to nail the question or articulate it in the right fashion, right? That's when you're setting up yourself for success. Because it's very important, like we say this in our adult world, right? That it's very important to articulate your feelings. At the same time, it's very important to articulate and measure the words you use in your day-to-day lives. And this will take you a long way, right? So in today's session, what we're going to do is we'll possibly get hold of an understanding of, say, for the boys, the nuts and bolts of effective communication. For the girls, the flowers and petals of what we want to bring out from communication. And we'll possibly touch on some of the basics. I know 60 minutes is not a long time, but I'll try and cover whatever I can that is possibly help you guys as basic learning tools. I'll also recommend a book for all of you at the end of the session. It's available online, plus it's available in stores. So try and get your hand on it because, again, reading is another important tool of enhancing your communication, right? So what we'll do today is we'll possibly touch on some of the basics of communication like listening, understanding nonverbal cues, overcoming common teen challenges, which we can engage together, talk together and understand, look at some emotional barriers that we can possibly break. Maybe if we have some time, touch upon some digital communication pitfalls because digital is the biggest tool that you guys use today, right? And I'll try and use some practical tips, some real life scenarios for you guys and help you express yourself in whatever way we can. So let's try and make this a nice interactive session where you guys are not only listening in, but asking questions and at the same time understanding, right? So let me just throw up a question on how many of you all understand what is effective communication. Again, just raise your hand, just answer. There's no right or wrong in this session, okay? So just be bold enough, just come to the floor, just answer what's your thinking and understanding of effective communication. Let me hear you guys. Nobody?
Mama, I can see so many hands raised. That's good.
Okay, just unmute.
So I'll
Getting your point across.
okay.
Very nice.
Effective communication is when one person, the sender, talks to to the receiver, and the receiver understands it well, and it's just not like chit chatting. It's for a purpose.
I like how you're articulating it, but we could also say chatting is also communicating, right?
But is it effective? Is chit
Ma'am, I
chatting
think
It's not effective communication.
hello, ma'am. Can you hear
Yes,
me?
yes, we can hear you now.
Ma'am, I think that effective communication is something the sender wants to give, it's the same information that the receiver gets.
I love how all of you are trying to articulate it, right? In your own very world and your own very fashion. It's fantastic. So it goes down to say that you guys really understand what effective communication is. You very clearly know the understanding. Yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
Ma'am, I just I have some different views that it's okay that the other person understands me, but for that I have to be I have to be confident enough to ask something to that person or to tell something to that person. Ma'am, just what you said before, like you just threw a question to us and we raised our hand, but we were not that confident enough.
But you know something, Andri? I'd say the beginning of effective communication is raising that hand, right?
Yes, but we raised hand maybe 2 to 3 seconds after we understood that now we have to answer. We have to be bold. This is a WTP session.
Honestly, I think that's great. That's a positive step ahead. I can give you an example of the older generation, which is possibly my generation, where we were very apprehensive. The 3 seconds that you guys took to raise hands, our teachers would wait for 5 minutes and we would still be contemplating, oh my God, should I? That's the reason why I said there are no rights and wrongs. Everybody has their own point of view and different thought process, right?
We are exactly the same.
No, I think y'all are much bolder, and the responses that I was just hearing, right? Your articulation of what you think effective communication is fantastic, is bang on. So thank you, Andri, for actually raising your hand, unmuting yourself, and being able to, communicate. I think that's the first stepping stone. Yeah. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Jude, you want to go next?
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, effective communication is about conveying a message clearly and precisely.
Fantastic.
Maybe communicating in a way that it's clear and there's clarity, and then the person is listening actively.
Thank you, Vanya. That's precise.
Effective communication is ensuring that the message is clear and easily understood, avoiding ambiguity. This could be portrayed by body language so that the person understands better, using facial expressions and other non-verbal cues to reinforce the message. Instead of just forming the sentence, or facial expressions and body language do also affect our communication.
Thank you, Asim. I think you very clearly articulated the exact dictionary meaning for effective communication. Okay, I can see a lot of hands raised. Go ahead, kids.
Ma'am, I feel an effective communication is one where there is no gap between communicating and where the message is properly sent, received, and understood with clarity and purpose.
Thanks, Paki. Rudra, you want to go next?
Yes, ma'am, for sure. Basically, what I think is effective communication is like crafting a clear, mutual understood message that is concise, and it is like made effective using active listening and empathy, of course.
Fantastic. I love the fact that you brought in empathy. That's very important. Arisa, Aisha?
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, according to me, the effective communication is a process where the sender and the receiver exchange the information and their thoughts, feelings.
In my perspective, effective communication is something, even if it's a little communication, where everyone who is speaking to each other can understand each other and deliver their thoughts properly and is equally understood by everyone.
Thanks, Arisa. Thanks, Aisha. That's absolutely fabulous, and it's fantastic to see how you all actually understand the the impact that effective communication can have, right? And while 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 we were listening to everyone's rendition of effective communication, I love what Rudra said, right? Having empathy, most important and critical. I love what Asim said, bringing in body language. It's absolutely important, right? And it's the key. That's how you can resonate with what a person is talking about. That's how you can actually sit and connect with the person. Imagine I was just sitting down there without any expressions, without any body language, and just talking literature on effective communications, which you could possibly read in a book. Would be absolutely disappointing, right? Would not be engaging at all for you, right? So I totally agree with what each one of you said. Effective communication is more than just exchanging information. It's actually about making sure that the information is not just sent, but also received by you, understood the way it was intended to be, right? We just saw the example. The sender was trying to explain and had a different intent. The intent was to get the receiver to understand the name of the three players. Similarly, in your communication, it's important to understand the way the communication is intended towards, right? Imagine, for example, if you're telling a joke, if the punchline of the joke does not actually land with people, and for example, if I have to pick up, say, Johan, you just said a joke and everybody just sat tight, nobody smiling, nothing, and it's only you who's smiling, what would you understand from that? Definitely you'll understand that, oh, okay, nobody's understood my joke. I think the punchline is dead, right? Because nobody's understood the joke. The joke has flopped. Nobody's got the crux of it. Nobody's even smiling. That's where the problem lies, right? So ideally, when we talk of communication, and for communication to be effective, what we need to remember is just one thing. Your message needs to hit the mark perfectly, right? It needs to land perfectly for the opposite person to understand. What is it that you need to do? Top 3 points to remember, just to ensure that your communication is actually hitting the mark. One, clear articulation. When we say clear articulation, it is making sure what you say is easy to understand. I can't be having the Oxford Dictionary language, which none of you possibly will understand, right? If I have to use broader terminologies, it'll all go bouncer, right? That's the language that teens talk, right? It's gone bouncer. It's gone over my head. I just don't understand what she's trying to say. So keep it very easy and simple so that the opposite person understands. That's called clear articulation. Active listening. Many a times we are not paying attention, right? Our screens are on. Hi, Aditya, you want to say something? Okay. Many a times what happens is we're trying to multitask. We're trying to listen to one podcast or listen to a session at the same time. Side, we are doing our homework. On the other side, you have a ping from a friend. You're trying to respond to that message. You're not doing justice to either of them, right? So paying full attention to one conversation, one topic, or one task is extremely important, right? Third and most important thing, like I said, effective communication can't be a one-way traffic, right? It needs to go either ways. So you need to listen and then you need to also engage. And hence, feedback, very important, right? Responding in a way that confirms whether you've understood or asking for a clarification. That clearly then means you're listening. So 3 important things: clear articulation, active listening, and feedback. These are the most important things that you should possibly keep as a master sheet with you when we are talking of effective communication, right? Because like it is said, that mastering these elements ensures that whether you're talking or listening, the conversation is flowing smoothly, everyone's in the mood, is understanding what you're talking about. These are the critical elements that are taken care of, right? While we talk of clear articulation, active listening, and feedback, Can somebody just tell me, why is it important to listen? Anybody, just raise your hand and just unmute yourself and answer. Why is it important to listen?
May I speak?
Yes, please. Go ahead.
So the reason that we should listen more is to collect the feedback on the tone of their voice. Because I personally think that when you're listening to the person and when they are responding, there is a specific tone of voice that they would be giving out, which can help, I think, to signal their expression at first. Then we can use it to understand their subconscious mind. Thirdly, we can also use that to transform the conversation that we are having with the person into something more deeper. And people tend to have different types of conversations. Some tend to have, like, I think they have small talk, and some like extremely deep conversations. To understand what they want, active listening, I think personally that it is extremely vital. So that is my view on that point. Thank you.
Thanks, Johan. Yes, Vanya, what do you think?
I feel it enhances the understanding between you and the speaker. And then if you're talking to someone, it also builds trust that yes, the person is listening to me nicely, and you feel heard when you're speaking to someone.
Absolutely right. Tehzeeb, you wanna tell us what you think?
So what I think is by listening to others, we actually understand what they're saying. We actually take their opinion and afterwards work on it after taking their opinion, something like that.
You're almost there. You're almost right. So just to simplify it, right?
Ma'am, can I also try?
Sure, Suvir, go ahead.
So, ma'am, in my opinion, the simplest answer to this question is that without speaking, without learning about the other person's opinion, you can't really have a two-way conversation. Because if I don't listen to you or you do not listen to me, we can't answer each other. We can't hold a conversation. So, in order to hold a conversation, it is important to first listen. That is my point.
Thanks, Suvir. And we are actually bringing and enhancing that point, right? To say, what is the importance of listening? You actually nailed it by saying that it's important and critical to ensure that both the sender and the receiver are listening. Why is it important to listen in most simple articulated language? Is when you really listen, you understand better, you learn more, and yes, more than anything, you will have less arguments. Did you see the sender and receiver in the video arguing? Because obviously what the sender said, the receiver didn't understand. So there was a lot of ambiguity in understanding over there. And that's the reason why when the sender was saying that who is the first player, what is the second, and I don't know is the third, he should have listened. Because he didn't listen, he couldn't understand the names and he was still struggling, right? So what does listening help? In listening, we call something as active listening and passive listening, right? Active listening, in fact, helps you catch the nuances in a conversation, which are these small elements, right? They are able to help you get the emotions behind the words and the unspoken context, which is possibly underlying in those statements. You'll possibly, one of you may stand up and ask me, okay, how do we do that? Simple tips, very simple, just to ensure that you are able to sharpen your listening skills. Two things that you need to remember: focus and echo. I just said this a couple of seconds back, right? Why do we say focus? Don't multitask all the time. It really won't help. Don't keep engaging possibly or distracted with your phones, because that's what I see with a lot of teenagers nowadays, right? You're either on your phones, you're distracted, You're possibly not looking at the speaker because you don't have eye contact and body language. You're not able to give your 100% listening. And that's where the entire issue happens, right? So focus. Second, echo. It's very important. Many a times we tend to miss on this. It's very important many a times to say that what I've heard, I want to relay back to myself. So repeating what you've heard can help clarify a lot of gaps that may be there in the understanding. And that possibly shows that you're engaged. For example, say I'm talking about importance of listening. Say I'm just picking up a name which I can see on my screen. Assuming I asked Nihar, right? And Nihar reiterates my question before answering. It very clearly articulates to me that Nihar was listening to my question very carefully. That is another trait which possibly you guys should also remember. These are certain tricks that we keep in mind, right? Because when you talk of listening, many a times we tend to focus, but we tend to miss out on the echo of the conversation. So you may have heard the question, you may have got distracted in framing the answer in your mind. And when you go back to answer the question, you're like, oh, ma'am, can you please repeat the question? There is then that ambiguity and question mark, right? So hence, effective communication, to be able to have effective communication, important to listen. And while you're listening, two very important things to be kept in mind, right? One, verbal communication and non-verbal communication. Two important traits that we always keep in mind while communicating, right? Because it's always said that while words are powerful, a lot of communication happens without them. Many a times you almost have seen your teacher just call out your name and just raise her eyebrows. It's communicating that I'm angry. How? The body language, the facial expression, even possibly the tone at which she calls out your name communicates the message very clearly, right? I'll give you another example. What do you think when you see people sitting with crossed arms like this? What does that signify? Can anyone tell me?
It signifies like they are angry.
Okay. To
They're
some
not
extent.
Like a wrong person.
Sorry, Rudra, you were saying something?
Yeah, they're not open to communicate, like they are a little
Yes.
bit hesitating.
Yes. Bang on, Rudra. Thank you so much. When you see somebody cross their hands and listen to you, they could be listening to you, but they're not open to what you're saying. So technically it means I'm listening to you, but I don't agree with what you're saying. That's the body language. So what do? I then have to change my communication method with that person, right? So that his closed arms become open and he or she is listening to me, right? How do you possibly start that? If you see somebody with their closed arms, pause and then hold on and say, I'm glad we are talking. I'm glad we are engaging on this conversation, but tell me if you have a different opinion. What does that mean? You're acknowledging the other person, right? Thanks, Rudra. That was really helpful because that indeed is one big example which stands straight, right? So coming back to our conversation, understanding, communicating, and understanding both verbal and non-verbal cues is extremely crucial in communicating, right? Either for yourself or for others. What does it do? It helps you read the room and adjust your approach accordingly. I just give you an example, right? Which is of somebody having closed their arms close to a conversation to opening it up. That's a fine example, right? Another example I can possibly throw up to you all is with the cricket fever on and the T20 World Cup going on. I think I'll pick up the T20 World Cup as one example, right? Say it's like knowing if a pitch is going to be a fast ball pitch or a curve ball pitch. How many of you are cricket fanatics here? Just send me an emoji. Okay. So is just about understanding the pitch, right? So while a bowler goes to understand the pitch, he adjusts his bowling tactics accordingly, right? Similarly, when you get into a conversation, you have to understand the psyche of the opposite person, of how he or she is welcoming your conversation. And that gives you very clearly from the body language, right? So hence, communicate, but also focus on communication, focus on your listening, echo most importantly when you're listening, and keep in mind the verbal and non-verbal communication tools, right? Which is body language very importantly. Clear up to now? Any questions up to now? Please raise your hands and we can possibly take them. Any experience you all want to share, please raise your hand. We can take them before we get into barriers. Anyone wants to share anything? Any situation where you thought you were effectively communicating, but unfortunately the opposite person was not listening to you, and it was a fine example of a disastrous or ineffective communication? No? Okay, so let's proceed then. We'll then talk about something that you guys face on a regular basis, right? Paki, I can see you've raised your hand.
Ma'am, I just wanted to share my experience if you would allow.
Certainly.
So, ma'am, actually, I was having a debate before my summer vacations in my class, which was about, if you are a feminist or not. So, I'm just, telling how I used, like, for example, I said I'm a feminist. Now, there was a girl in my class who raised a question against me. I, gave the answer of that thing, but she was not ready to understand me. I told many things. I also, talked about some reports that have proved some things, but she was again and again insisting on that when one topic which was not even relevant to my, conversation. I mean, sorry. So, how to deal with such students? Like I face this in a lot of debates. I try to make them understand, but they're not, ready to get out of that zone. Like they're restricted to only that one point. They're not able to think in a broader way.
So Paki, thanks for sharing that experience. But that's where then you need to take one step back to say, what is the scenario I can build to give them a fine understanding of the situation? See, when you enter a communication, right, or when you enter a debate, for example, the reason why people often are closed in understanding communication because they come with a certain mindset, right? Honestly, I could have started the session giving you all a lot of gyan about what is effective communication, get into the barriers, get into the tips, tricks. The reason I started it with an example and a video is so that you can relate to it, right? Once we see a situation, we're able to relate to a situation, a live example, we then sway with the conversation. We then start accepting the conversation. We then start engaging with the conversation. So my recommendation to you, Paki, is always segue your conversation or start your conversation possibly to a difficult audience like this with a live example. Yeah, it will help you then maneuver the message that you want to land effective. Yeah, and with that point, we'll possibly touch upon emotional barriers. This is something that I've seen many a times as a huge component of effective communication in teens, right? And I think it's important how these emotional barriers are dealt with and how you overcome them. This is possibly a conversation y'all can have with your parents, your seniors, your folks at home, teachers, where you all possibly see this dilemma many a times, right? So I always say this to many children or to many folks when I'm talking to them, right? I say that as a teen, teenagers nowadays are riding on a roller coaster of emotions. And it's actually a roller coaster with those highs and lows, right? And sometimes they can get in the way of clear communication. So how do you help teenagers be in that roller coaster situation, yet be comfortable to be able to communicate? Right? I'm sure many of you have had the situation where, or a moment where you were so frustrated or upset that you couldn't even get your words out right. You've been in absolutely angry situation where you're like, forget it, I don't want to talk right now. You've made a barrier for communication, right? So I can see a lot of you nodding your head, which technically means that the answer is yes. Then what's that? That's an emotional barrier. And the emotional barrier is doing its thing because it's there. It's a feeling, it's an emotion that has to be brought up, right? But with this barrier and with the bad news of having a barrier, there's also a good news. The good news is you can learn how to manage these emotions. And trust you me, it's super easy. At the click of a finger like this, you can actually keep them from hijacking your conversations. And supremely easy. Just two things you need to remember on how to overcome these emotional barriers. Pause and reflect. You're feeling heated, you're feeling angry. Take a moment to breathe. Collect your thoughts before you respond, and then go ahead and talk. So number one, pause and reflect. Do not react. Many a times people tend to just react, right? And that's the biggest mistake. Second, express your feelings. It's important you express your feelings, good, bad, ugly. So instead of just bottling up or just shutting yourself to say that, okay, fine, I don't want to have a conversation, express what you want to say. You could be happy at a situation, you could be disgruntled with a situation, express it, right? Always remember that once you're able to express, you're able to start a conversation, right? So, for example, if you need to express at that point of time, instead of using the I statement, saying that I want to do this, say, I feel upset when, for example, if you're talking to your mom, I feel upset when you do XYZ. So your mom knows that you're upset and then has to deal with the communication or the conversation with you in that fashion. You very clearly brought your emotion out, right? Rather than making it a barrier. Always keep in mind, bring your emotion to the forefront, because then the opposite person who's a receiver will start receiving the communication with that mindset, right? So in order to ensure that your emotional barrier is dealt with, two important things: pause and reflect, and second, express your feelings. Yeah, I want one example. Anybody give me one example of when you had faced an emotional barrier and how you overcame it. Or you faced an emotional barrier and you got into the situation where you let the emotional barrier overplay or overpower you and you didn't have a conversation. It could be anything.
I'm sorry, I didn't raise my hand, but
no problem, Mandri. Go ahead.
Ma'am, today I had school and there I was needed to submit a project. It's not. I have seen this with my one of my friend. It didn't happen to me, but that friend had a family problem. Like her father's maybe one brother had died suddenly, so she wasn't able to do the project within the time barrier. So she tried to communicate to the teacher. She told the teacher, I need just one day, at least give me one day time. We are our exams are going on right now. So she is busy in exams, and she asked the teacher to give her at least one day, but the teacher didn't even give what to say, didn't even give importance to her family problems. She started telling that I also have many family problems, but I also check your projects and all. But is this effective communication? No. But we as a student, we cannot do anything.
You know, Andri, thank you so much for sharing this. And I think I'll go back couple of minutes back when we were talking about this whole conversation of effective communication, right? And Rudra, I'm coming back and looking at you because you've left a very important key message that I want all of you to take from this session is empathy, right? Andre, to your question, was that effective communication? That was not. And
No, ma'am.
I would also say it lacked empathy, right?
It's very harsh to say, but sometimes teachers do lack in empathy.
I do understand that, Andre. And I will not judge your teacher at the moment. I don't know the situation she was in, but I can definitely say that that was not effective communication, right? Because the sender could not connect with the receiver. And in that conversation, what really lacked from the receiver's end was empathy, right? So I'm really liking the fact that we are engaging, we are all talking, we are sharing this, because these real life examples only give us an understanding of how effective communication should really be effective and impactful in all our lives, right? And you all are all teenagers getting out of school, in college, are going to face the harsh world in another couple of years. I think it's very important, and that's the key, right? Empathy needs to be at the center when you're communicating, not only with your parents, not only with your loved ones, at your workplaces, possibly while you're traveling, in all of these elements. And that's why I wanted to actually touch upon what is the role of empathy in communication, right? And how we could possibly enhance your empathetic communication skills, right? And what are the approaches you need to take? We can't be correcting the rest of the world, but if we understand and we know how to deal with empathetic situations and communication, I think it'll be fantastic, because we'll then spread that word across, right? Today, I've learned it through practical and theoretical knowledge, and I'm able to share it with you all. And hence, for me, empathy lies at the center of what we do, right? When we are communicating, whether it's in our business roles, in our personal lives, wherever. So understanding and sharing the feelings of another person, where you can elevate communication, is called empathy. What does empathy do? It allows you to connect on a deeper level and can turn a simple conversation into a meaningful exchange. To Andre's example, the teacher could have brought empathy in it and actually dealt with that situation in a much better manner. And I'm sure that's exactly what Andri and the class also felt, right, Andri? That's precisely what you wanted, that your teacher deals with empathy on that situation, because that's how you feel. But when you have a situation like this, how can you possibly be a receiver who's using empathy to enhance your communication? 3 important tools here. Okay. Number 1, listen to understand, not to respond. Listening is a very effective communication tool, but you have to use listening very effectively in different situations. So when you're in an empathetic conversation, you have to listen to understand the situation, just not to be a respondent. It's very simple, because sometimes it's not about always our reply, right, to a conversation, but it's about understanding the other person's perspective and then responding. Going back to Andri's example, the teacher should have actually listened to understand, not just to give a response. Acknowledge their feelings. You don't have to agree with everyone all the time, but at least acknowledge how they feel, right? That can actually help validate their emotions. And at the same time, what it'll do is foster a close connection. Today, Andri would have had a close connection with her teacher if her teacher would have acknowledged the feeling, right? Today, she's not acknowledged that feeling, and that's why, unfortunately, the teacher's not been able to foster that emotion with Andri. Third and most important thing, respond appropriately. Again, going back to Andri's example, right? Respond effectively with empathy. Use what you've learned about the feelings of people. Use what you've learned about the situation to craft that in your response and then reply, right? What this will show is, this will show that you care and you're truly engaged in the conversation and understand the situation. Am I right, Andre? Is that what you were expecting from your teacher?
Yes, ma'am.
Brilliant. Very simple, right? Do we apply it in our lives? Many a times we tend to skip it. So how are we going to apply these? Is with these small little tips and tricks, right? I'm just bringing out live examples, which for you teenagers is relevant and important. Correct? Anyone wants to possibly share an example or share a situation till what we've spoken right now about?
Ma'am, can I share a situation?
Sure, Asim.
So, ma'am, similar situation to Andy's. I had gone to the school late. As per there was death in my house, specifically of my grandmother. I was really connected, so I had went a few hours late. When I went to communicate with the teacher, I had lacked the assignment, and the day of submission was that day itself. When I told her the news, she responded with, "I'm really sorry to hear that. I will provide you with 2 to 3 days to work in. I hope you get better soon. I really feel sorry for your loss." This was the reply she gave to me when I spoke my sorrow, and she said, "We must move on. We must move on in our lives. All good things don't stay forever." The response was empathetic, in my opinion. It felt the connection between the senders and the receiver. She understood what I was facing. She felt my emotions, and she knew that my perspective, my emotions, and my feelings, what I was feeling, and how much I was overwhelmed at that point. And she replied in the way she should have.
Thanks, Asim, for sharing that. I think that's a fantastic example. That the conversation for you with your teacher came out to be more empathetic. You do respect and relate, and possibly that communication or that incident, for that matter, has stayed along for you because empathy was at the center of the communication, right? That you had. Otherwise, this example would have not stayed in your head. It would have been like another day, right, of school for you. Similarly, so when we talk of empathy in communication, right, we've seen two examples. One from Andre, where it was an adverse situation. One from Asim, where it was a fantastic situation where his teacher could relate with his sorrow, right? And brought empathy at the center. Would Asim ensure that next time he do a little bit extra to achieve something with the teacher's class? Yes, he definitely would. Is Andre put off with the teacher currently? Yes, she is, unfortunately, because her expectations of the teacher of being more empathetic towards her student totally lacks. Right? Thank you so much for sharing. Yes, Farah, I can see your hands up.
Yeah, so even I would like to share an example. So this summer I went for a residential camp. And over there, unfortunately, I fell ill. I had vomiting, I had a fever, and I really wasn't at, I really didn't feel well. When I told the in charge about this, she merely said that it's okay, it'll go in some time, and you don't need to worry about it. But then that did not happen. It escalated. And it escalated, and my fever, I could feel it. It was almost above 100 degrees Celsius. So I went to her again, and then she's like, "It's going to be fine. Close your eyes and sit." I asked her if I could lie down for a while, or maybe, take some basic rest. But then she refused to that too. And only the next day, when it escalated to a point where I wasn't able to stand up or walk, that's when they took me to a hospital, and then that's when they got me treated. But till then, I felt it was very irresponsible for the in charge to not pay attention to someone who was actually sick and they had a fever.
Swara, thanks for sharing that incident. But I hope that your health was taken care of and was put as the prime important piece over there in that camp, and your parents also informed about your health.
So there was strict policies about not calling parents. So no, they were not informed. But I took medicines, and in a span of 2 days, I was fine.
I'm so happy to hear that you were fine, but I think thanks for sharing that example, right? Because it's again a fine example of broken trust in communication, right? I'm sure your parents would have got to know of your ill health after you came back from the camp. From whom? From you or from the management? I'm assuming from you, right? Was that effective communication on part of your teachers or the school? It wasn't.
No.
And it was pertaining to the safety and security of a ward, right, or a child. And it's important and critical that at least the parents be communicated that. What has that possibly done? It may have possibly broken trust with your parents to ensure that Swara goes for the next camp as well, right? So fine example of how broken trust, miscommunication, lack of empathy actually fall flat when you're trying to communicate and build trust, right? What is communication all about? It's about building bonds, right? But in order to build bonds, you need to understand that various facets of communication and the way we communicate needs to be regarded, which many a times is not done. I'll possibly touch upon the last element which I had designed for y'all, okay, which is effective communication in school. School, college, for many of y'all who possibly are if in grade 12th or older degrees and are looking at internships, how can you communicate there? What is it that you possibly need to do in such formal environments, right? Because you can't be having buddy conversations in school with your teachers or your principal, right? So what is it that you need to do in formal environments like these, where your communication needs to be clear and professional, right? Again, I love the number 3. So you will see many a times I bring out 3 simple examples because that's also how our brain functions, right? We remember 1, 2, 3. Who came first, who came second, who came third. After that, we forget. So I always use that as a thumb rule in life to say, remember 3 principles of effective communication in school. Number 1, always be prepared. You are the sender. So always remember the sender needs to be prepared. For example, if it's a class presentation, it's possibly a class meeting that you need to go for. It's possibly, say, an exam that you have. Always ensure that you're well prepared. Okay. For example, this happens many a times when you have oral exams, right? I don't know whether many of you all still have them, but this applies a lot when you have exams. Many a times when you have a presentation to be made in class, students just do this at the last moment. They're not prepared. They don't know what to read out of the slide. Unfortunately, that's not effective communication. That's not what you're trying to showcase, right? So when it comes to your work related to school or a professional environment you're in, always number 1, be prepared, right? Because being well prepared shows 2 things. 1, respect for your audience who are there to hear you. And 2, most importantly for yourselves, it will help ease your nerves. If you go unprepared in a situation, you'll be constantly nervous, biting your words and your tongue and not knowing what you're articulating, right? Number 2, be clear and direct always. Don't run round and round the mulberry bush, right? It's a fantastic poem, but don't use it in practical life, especially when it comes to a professional setting. And a school is also a professional setting. I always say that it is the stepping stone to our professional lives and journeys, right? So very clearly, be clear, be direct, be concise in communication, because that is truly appreciated in the professional world. What does it do? It saves time and it reduces misunderstandings, which many a time occur with you using too many words or too many sentences, which you don't know how to tie it together. And third and most important one, follow up. For example, after you've had a meeting or you've possibly had a discussion, right? Follow up to understand, hey, I wanted to just get a quick recap of what we just spoke about. I just wanted to follow up on what was the discussion we had in class on our project. Hey, have you finished XYZ of the project? Hey, how can we do this? What this does is a quick recap in any fashion will ensure that everyone is on the same page and nobody is distorted, especially for your projects. Right? So always remember that when you want to effectively communicate, especially in school, in professional settings, 3 things: be prepared, be clear and direct, and use the mechanism of follow-up. I know we are on time, but this was the last topic that I wanted to cover for y'all, because I know a lot of y'all have been paying great attention. This has been a fantastic session of effective communication. And I think possibly we can use a couple of minutes just to understand what you guys felt, whether you all really understood the session. Is there something you all want to take away? Any questions you all have? Something that you possibly want me to speak to you all next on? I'm more than happy to hear that before we conclude the session. Okay, silence.
Can I speak?
Sure, please go ahead.
Yes. So I have a question to you, Miss Preeti ma'am. As teens who are learning to communicate effectively, how do we communicate with those who are challenged, let's say mentally? That personally speaking, in my school, let's say that there are like a few students who are mentally challenged. So how do I communicate with them more effectively, and how do I get my message across to them without actually uh, hurting them or making them understand in general?
Okay. So, Johan, I will certainly respond to your question, but before that, effective communication, right? That's what we've been speaking for 1 hour. You never address them as mentally challenged. You call them specially abled, right? That's point number 1. That's how you address, because they are all able. It's just that they may be in a different form. So that's why we call them specially abled. They are special children.
Yes.
They are not mentally challenged. Okay. What did I say in the beginning? Communication is just not about how you articulate. I think the human being has been gifted by the body that we call, right? The hands that we use. Body language, a great resource to communicate, right? We may not know sign language, or you may not be able to communicate in a fashion that he or she understands. First, it's important, Johan, that you understand how regular communication is happening with that schoolmate of yours. There's definitely a comfort zone that he or she is in with his loved ones. And if you want to bring empathy over there, I think most important is first for you to understand that. Then go on to communicating on a regular fashion, because then your colleague will actually start understanding you. But first, I want you to break the barrier of from today not using the word mentally challenged.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah. And you will say specially abled. So I definitely want to hear from you through any way. You can even write into Tejaswini and tell Tejaswini how you manage it. But tell me, what is it that that colleague or that schoolmate of yours prefers when he communicates with his loved ones? Because there is a way of communicating, right? And I love the fact that you want to communicate with him to be able to go closer to him, build a relationship with him. So I think first, bring empathy at the forefront, understand what he prefers as communication, because you could use various techniques, right? But it won't be something that relates to him. So I don't want it to take you away from it. So keep empathy at the forefront, understand from his loved ones how he prefers to communicate. They become your receivers, and then start modeling yourself to communicate in that fashion.
Yes.
Does that help?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Yes, Swara. Tejaswini, can we take one last question? I know we are time up.
Sure, ma'am, no problem.
Thank you. Swara, you had a question? I can see your hand raised.
So it's not exactly a question. I would like to discuss another barrier that we face during communication. So what happens is most of the times when you're trying to put a point forward, the audience doesn't give you the same response. It doesn't give you back the effort you're putting into the conversation. You put a lot of effort into the conversation. You try to make the audience understand. But sometimes what happens is that the audience discourage you. This, I think, I'd call a social barrier where your audience doesn't give you an adequate response to like the effort you're putting out.
Thank you, Swara, for highlighting that barrier, because I think the barrier is a fine example of the session we are in right now, right? I know we have some 70 odd participants, but I can just see a handful of you all who've switched on your cameras, are engaging. It is a social barrier that they've laid upon them, right? How do you break that barrier? Is when you start to get them to realize that the barrier needs to be broken by themselves and not from the sender. So the receiver is someone who will help break that barrier, right? Does that help?
Ma'am, it does. Thank you.
So thank you, everybody. Thank you for being such a fantastic audience. I really loved engaging with all of you, talking to all of you, sharing with you all my experiences, my knowledge. I hope this was useful, and I hope this kind of helps you all in your journey forward to adulthood, if I can say. So all the very best. But I think as we wrap up, I'll possibly encourage you to take what you've learned and put it into practice. Like I told Johan, Johan is going to put something into practice. Andri is going to put some of the elements into practice, possibly. Rudra, thank you for the key message once again. Empathy is at the center of communications. And I think what I believe is practice, practice, and practice. Even while you communicate, it's important for you to practice to be able to deliver communications in the manner that we all want, right? We possibly want to be treated in a certain fashion while communicating. And I think it's important also that we communicate in a certain fashion to demand that respect. So while you're communicating, keep the nuances in mind that we discussed today. And I think that will really help you all go a long way while you all are communicating, not only in your personal lives, but also in your professional lives. Also, like I promised, there is a fantastic book on communications. It's called Communication Skills for Teens. Y'all can find it online. For all those who love to read, it's available in audio form as well as in hard copy form. So you can go and get your hands on it. It gives you a fantastic understanding of everything that we spoke today about. So with that, I'll possibly hand over to Tejaswini. And thank you once again for being such a fantastic audience, all of you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Even I learned a lot of things when it comes to be a good listener, to be a good communicator. So I hope the teens must have enjoyed the session, and the way they were interacting up directly with you, that was really great and made the session more insightful. So thank you so much for your time, ma'am. And any last message that you want to give to the teens for this session, or any key message that you want to give them, any one statement that you want to say them?
You know, Tejaswini, I love the fact of how they were all engaging. They've shared experiences. It's very rare that when you're in conversations like these, that children actually open up, right? And thank you all for being such a fantastic audience. Not only just listening, but ensuring that we had effective communication happening for the past 1 hour, 15 minutes, if I can say precisely. I wanted to go back with one key message that Rudra Pratap Singh left us with. So, in your day-to-day communication, in your road ahead with communication, keep empathy at the center, be confident about yourselves. At the same time, be precise with what you want to communicate and want to be heard. That's, I think, one key message I want to leave all of you with.
Yes, yes.
So
I feel that the way they were sharing the experiences, what they had about the school incidents and everything, that was quite nice. That eventually take one of the step that they are taking towards effective communication. So that was really very great. Even I was listening to all of things that, yeah, this happened, that happened, the way they are doing it. And when that point came where you also mentioned that in our time, we were not that. We used to just like hide from teachers. That no, I am not the one today who wants to answer the question. But the way they are taking active participation, that's really great. So, ma'am, as we conclude this masterclass, I want to really extend my gratitude and thanks from Blub World and the World Teen Parliament. Thank you so much for giving us your time. Thank you so much for joining us. And even thanks to all the teenagers, because the way they have shown the participation there with all that enthusiasm, that was really very nice. So thank you so much. And ma'am, we'll surely meet up again. And these teens will eventually get one more chance to talk to you, even just 1 hour just pass like that. So hope to see you soon, ma'am, and hope to see all the teens soon.
Absolutely, Tejasvi. Thank you so much. Thank you all of you for spending your Saturday evenings, not getting distracted by the India match that is going on.
Yeah.
So I will ensure that we rest this session over here. All the very best for your futures. And thank you all for a fantastic evening. Have a great weekend, everyone.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you. Bye-bye. Take care. Bye, ma'am.